Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. The snow fell softly over Genoa City, but inside the Newman ranch the air was anything but calm. Victor Newman stood near the fireplace, his back straight, his eyes dark and unreadable. A glass of bourbon rested untouched in his hand. Across from him, Michael Baldwin shifted uncomfortably. "This is escalating, Victor," Michael warned carefully. "Phyllis isn't someone you corner without consequences." Victor's jaw tightened. She made it personal. Michael sighed. "It's always personal with you." Victor didn't respond. Instead, he walked toward the large window overlooking the ranch grounds. His empire had survived wars, betrayals, hostile takeovers, and family fractures. But this was different. Phyllis Summers had crossed a line. She had dug into Newman Enterprises' private accounts. She had fed information to Billy Abbott. She had whispered lies into Jack's ear. And worst of all, she had threatened Victoria. Victor could tolerate attacks on his business. He would not tolerate threats against his family. "She thinks she's smarter than me," Victor muttered. Michael stiffened. Victor. But Victor had already made up his mind. Across town, Phyllis paced her suite at the Grand Phoenix, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. She was on the phone, her voice low and urgent. "I don't care what he thinks he knows," she hissed. "Victor doesn't scare me." She ended the call and looked at her reflection in the mirror, fierce, confident, unbreakable. Or at least that's what she told herself. She had baited Victor deliberately. She had leaked just enough information to rattle him. She wanted him off balance. Desperate men made mistakes. But Victor Newman wasn't just any man. A knock sounded at her door. Phyllis frowned. "Who is it?" "A room service." She hadn't ordered anything. Her instincts screamed at her to ignore it, but curiosity got the better of her. She cracked the door slightly. And that was all it took. A hand shoved the door wide open. Another grabbed her arm. Before she could scream, a cloth pressed against her mouth. The scent was sharp and chemical. Her vision blurred. The last thing she saw was the hallway ceiling spinning above her. When she woke, it was dark. Cold. Silent. Phyllis blinked slowly, her head pounding. She tried to move. Her wrists were tied. She sucked in a breath, panic flooding her veins. The room was dimly lit by a single hanging bulb, concrete walls, no windows. A warehouse. Or something like it. "Okay," she whispered to herself, "stay calm." Footsteps echoed from somewhere nearby. Her heart slammed against her ribs. The door creaked open. Victor Newman stepped inside. He wasn't rushed, he wasn't angry. He was calm, which made it worse. Phyllis stared at him in disbelief. "You've lost your mind." Victor closed the door behind him. "On the contrary." "You kidnapped me," she snapped. Victor tilted his head slightly, careful with accusations. She laughed bitterly. "Oh please, who else would have the ego and the resources?" Victor stepped closer. "You've been playing a dangerous game." "So have you," she fired back. "What, I expose a few dirty secrets and suddenly I disappear?" "You threatened my daughter." "I warned her." "You humiliated my company." "I uncovered the truth." Victor's eyes hardened. "You tried to destroy everything I built." Phyllis leaned forward despite the restraints. "No, Victor, I tried to remind you that you're not untouchable." Silence hung between them. Victor studied her carefully. "You don't understand consequences," he said quietly. "You never have. And you don't understand that people are sick of being afraid of you." He walked in a slow circle around her chair. "Fear maintains order. Fear makes enemies." Victor stopped in front of her. "You should have stayed out of this." Phyllis's pulse raced, but she refused to show weakness. "What's your endgame, Victor? You're going to keep me locked up forever." "I only need you out of the way long enough." "For what?" "That's not your concern." Her stomach dropped. "Victor," her voice lowered, more serious now, "this isn't business retaliation. This is kidnapping if anyone finds out." "No one will." "You're wrong." Victor's expression didn't change. "Am I?" Back at Crimson Lights, Nick paced anxiously. His calls to Phyllis had gone straight to voicemail for hours. "That's not like her," Sharon observed. "No," Nick agreed. "If she's ignoring me, she'd at least text something sarcastic." Victoria entered hurriedly, Dad been unreachable. Nick stopped packing what? He canceled 2 meetings and left the office. Nick's got twisted. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Meanwhile, Phyllis tested the ropes binding her wrists, tight, professional. She looked back at Victor. You can't seriously think this ends well. Victor folded his hands behind his back. It will end precisely the way I intend. You're underestimating me. Victor gave a faint smile. You are tied to a chair. Phyllis glared at him, and you're committing a felony. Victor leaned down slightly, his voice dropping. Sometimes sacrifices must be made to protect what matters. So I'm a sacrifice. You're collateral damage. That stung more than she expected. I'm not your enemy, she said quietly. Victor straightened. You made yourself one. He turned and walked toward the door. Victor, she shouted, this war you're starting, it's going to blow up in your face. He paused briefly but didn't turn around. Then he left. Phyllis was alone again. But something in Victor's eyes had unsettled her. He wasn't improvising. He had a plan, and she was only a piece of it. By the next morning, Genoa City was buzzing. Phyllis hadn't shown up to a critical meeting. She wasn't answering texts. Even Summer couldn't reach her. Nick drove to the Grand Phoenix himself. Her room was a mess. The doorframe had faint scratch marks. Nick's chest tightened. This wasn't voluntary, he muttered. Back at Newman Enterprises, Victoria confronted her father the moment he walked in. Where were you last night? Victor didn't break stride, handling matters. Is this about Phyllis? Victor stopped. Victoria's eyes narrowed. What did you do? Victor met her gaze evenly. Be careful with your tone. Did you hurt her? Victor's silence was deafening. Victoria stepped closer. Dad. She overplayed her hand. That doesn't answer me. Victor's jaw flexed. She is not your concern. Victoria stared at him in horror. You actually did something. Meanwhile, in the warehouse, Phyllis refused to give in to fear. She scanned the room again, old crates, rusted metal shelving, a small security camera in the corner. She forced herself to breathe steadily. Victor thought he had control. But he underestimated one thing. Phyllis never stopped fighting. Hours passed. Then the door opened again. But it wasn't Victor. It was one of his security men. He brought water. As he knelt to untie one hand so she could drink, Phyllis acted. She slammed her head forward, catching him off guard. The water bottle fell, he cursed. She twisted violently, knocking the chair sideways. It crashed to the floor. Chaos erupted. He tried to grab her, but she kicked hard, catching his knee. He stumbled. That was all she needed. She scrambled upright, one wrist still partially bound, and bolted toward the door. The hallway was narrow, industrial. She ran blindly, adrenaline drowning out pain. Shouts echoed behind her. She turned a corner and ran straight into Victor. He caught her before she hit the ground. For a split second, their eyes locked. You disappoint me, Victor said coldly. Let me go. You were safer staying put. Safer, she laughed breathlessly. You kidnapped me. Victor's grip tightened. You forced my hand. She stared at him, something shifting inside her. No, she said slowly, you chose this because control matters more to you than anything. Victor's expression flickered just slightly. Footsteps approached behind them. Nick's voice echoed faintly in the distance. Phyllis. Victor froze. Phyllis's heart leapt. Nick burst into view, followed by 2 police officers. The warehouse suddenly felt very small. Nick's eyes widened at the sight of her restrained wrist. Oh, Dad. Victor released her slowly. This is a misunderstanding, he said smoothly. Nick looked at him like he'd never seen him before. You kidnapped her. Victor didn't respond. The officers stepped forward cautiously. Sir, we're going to need you to come with us. Victor's gaze remained steady. You have no proof. Phyllis lifted her bruised wrists. Actually, she said hoarsely, I think they do. The standoff stretched painfully. Victoria appeared moments later, having followed Nick's lead. She saw the scene, her father surrounded, Phyllis shaken, Nick furious. And something inside her broke. Dad, she whispered, what have you done? For the first time, Victor looked cornered. Not afraid, but cornered. He had pushed too far. The war he started wasn't about business anymore. It was about family. And he had fractured his own. Nick stepped protectively in front of Phyllis. You don't get to decide who's collateral damage. Victor's eyes met his son. I did this to protect you. From what accountability? Silence. Heavy. Final. Phyllis leaned against Nick slightly, exhausted but defiant. You lost, Victor. Victor looked at her for a long moment. Then at his children. The empire he built stood tall. But the trust inside his family was crumbling. And for the first time in a long time, Victor Newman had no move left to play. The police escorted him out of the warehouse. Snow continued falling outside, quiet and indifferent. Phyllis watched as he was placed into the squad car. Her hands trembled, but her chin stayed high. The Newman War had gone too far. And nothing in Genoa City would ever be the same again.